Welcome to In the Money. I'm your host, Daniel Dent. Over the last 20 years, I've worked with families and businesses, helping them become financially savvy. And now I'm going to do the same for you. Each show, I share personal financial topics to help you make better informed financial decisions. Average Americans change jobs every 4.5 years. Many times, this means changing employers. When that happens, most of us think about our new responsibilities, moving to another city, the stresses of the new job, and how our families are affected. What most people forget about is their 401k or other retirement plan at their previous employer. If that money's sitting dormant in a forgotten retirement plan, you may be taking on more risk and not even knowing it. Jonathan McAlister, Certified Fund Specialist and Financial Advisor with Shoemaker Financial, is joining us today to talk about what to do and what your options are when you change jobs. If you have an old retirement plan or two floating around, or you're considering a job change, stay tuned.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Today we're discussing what to do with your retirement plan when you change jobs. Joining us is Jonathan McAlister, Certified Fund Specialist and Financial Advisor with Shoemaker Financial. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Before we get started, tell us a little bit about what you do and what you do at Shoemaker.
Yeah, I'm a financial planner, like you said, with Shoemaker Financial in Germantown. We work with mainly young professionals and people nearing retirement, small business owners, those in the medical professional, really taking them from where they are currently financially to where they want to be.
Okay, it seems like an obvious question, but I think it's important to reiterate. Why are retirement plans so important?
You would be shocked the amount of people that we speak with daily that they come into our office for the first time and they haven't really sat down and ever had that discussion before. The majority of Americans right now don't have anything saved for retirement. And when you look at it, that's a really shocking figure. The majority of people right now are depending on Social Security. And we know, especially if you've been paying attention to the election at all, is that Social Security will be bankrupt in about 20 years. So it's imperative that if people haven't started saving already, that they start saving as soon as possible.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think we see the same thing on the banking side where very few people these days have a lot saved up in their savings accounts. You just don't see that 3 to 6 month cash reserve that we all recommend that people should have. And then you'd mentioned Social Security, but also pensions with companies are starting to go away in favor of just more traditional retirement plans because of the cost. And then really 401ks, 403bs, those type of retirement plans where you contribute as the employee are really the main investment vehicle that people have for retirement. So let's talk about, with so many people changing jobs these days, the retirement plan is often the last thing on their mind. What are your options when you change employers?
So there's 4 options that you currently have whenever you separate employment and you have a retirement plan that you've left behind somewhere. 1 is to leave it in the current plan. 2, if you've taken a new job and you haven't retired or separated from work completely, is to roll that money into your new employer's plan. 3 is to roll it into some sort of personal plan like a traditional IRA and Roth IRA. And last and the least favorable tax-wise is to cash it out.
Mm-hmm. And I had a friend, I want to talk about the cashing out first because that's my least favorite thing as well. I had a friend to call a few weeks ago and ask, because she received a letter in the mail from her previous employer asking if they could send a check just to cash out her 401k.
Right.
And it was a smaller amount, but what's the impact if someone cashes out or makes that kind of withdrawal?
So what will happen is, and I think what you're talking about, that's probably a smaller amount, so the plan guidelines probably dictated that to happen. What happens at that point though is, let's say it's $10,000. They send her a check for $10,000. Well, that $10,000 now represents taxable income to her. And in addition to the income tax that she'll pay on that, if she's under the age of 59 and a half, she'll also pay an additional 10% penalty. So right now, if you're looking at the top tax bracket being about 39.6% federally, you could pay upwards of 49.6% if you're a really high income earner.
Yeah, almost half of whatever that withdrawal is will go to taxes. That's just really, in my mind, is a last resort of what you should do. Fidelity, I was reading an article recently, and Fidelity did a study on some withdrawals from October to December of 2013. And at that time, more than a third of the workers cashed out their retirement plans versus rolling them over or doing something else with them or transferring them into another 401k. And the number was even higher. It was over 40% among workers aged 20 to 39. So a lot of people out there cashing out, and they may or may not know that at the end of the year they're going to have a big tax burden that goes along with that, even though they may need the cash immediately. So, man, I'm with you. That's definitely the last resort.
I think it's when people think about it, they say, hey, I've got this cash coming to me. Why not take it? Why not take a trip? People fail to think about those long-term impacts of doing those actions.
Very true, very true. Let's talk about rollovers for a minute, because that's probably one of the more common things we see people do. Talk us through what those options look like.
So a rollover involves when you've separated employment from an employer and you want to move money from that retirement plan into either a personal IRA or a Roth IRA. That is a non-taxable transfer. So what you're doing is you're taking that money out of the 401k, 403b, or whatever it may be, and moving it to a personal plan. Now, if you're moving it to a traditional IRA, then you're going to pay no taxes because the dollars still remain tax deferred. If you do choose to move it to a Roth IRA, and this is not a recommendation, this is situation depending, always consult with your tax advisor or financial planner before you do this.
Absolutely.
Is if you move it to a Roth IRA, all those dollars now count as taxable income to you. You don't pay the 10% penalty because you're not withdrawing it. It's still staying in a retirement plan, but you will recognize those dollars as taxable income for that year.
And after speaking to your financial professional, if they do recommend that you roll over to one of those or the other, one of the neat things is generally in a 401k you have a limited amount of investment options, where going into a IRA or a traditional IRA or Roth IRA, you can basically invest in whatever you want or whatever suits you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on the company that you choose to go with, I know we at Shoemaker, we maintain what's called an open architecture platform. We can invest in any company across the world. We can use any investment company that we want to. But absolutely, you have a much wider range of investment options if you choose to go with a private plan versus staying in your 401k.
Yeah, the important thing about that is you can really tailor to your risk tolerance and time frame and what your retirement objectives are then,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Let's talk for a minute about I believe the second option that you said, transferring to your new employer's retirement plan. So what are some of the pros and cons that come along with that?
So pro is normally it's a very easy process. It's similar to doing a rollover to an IRA. Cons, like you just mentioned, is that you're still going to have those limited investment options. A lot of plans that we're seeing now are going to have, on the low side, about 7 different fund selections, and on the high side, I'd say about 20 to 25. So some of that may or may not fit with what we were talking about, your risk tolerance and your time horizon long term. So it's something that you need to carefully consider, because once those funds are moved into a 401k, depending on how the plan is written, you may not be able to roll them out to an IRA until you separate employment again.
That's a great point. And are there any cost differences that I guess that you should consider when rolling from or transferring from one 401k to another 401k?
Normally, there's really not. The funds inside the plan will normally charge an expense. The custodian might charge a small dollar amount every year, but normally the employer pays that.
Okay, hold that thought. We have to take a short break. More with Jonathan McAlister when we return.
Preventing wildfires. That's all Smokey wants for his 70th birthday.
So they say it's a man's world? I don't see anybody's name on it.
While they were doing their thing, we slowly changed all that.
Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to In the Money. If you're just joining us, we're discussing what to do with your retirement plan when you change employers. Joining us is Jonathan McAlister, a financial advisor with Shoemaker Financial. Jonathan, before the break, we were talking about the different options that you have when you change employers, what you can do with your retirement plan. Before we left, we were talking about transferring it from your old employer's 401k to your new employer's 401k. And I think where we left off was it's basically a generally at least a low-cost transfer. There's not a lot of difference except with the plan expenses themselves. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
That and really the internal investments in the funds that you can invest in there.
And then the last option that we didn't get a chance to get to before the break, you can also leave it in your current plan, your previous employer's plan, right? So what are some of the pros and cons around leaving it where it is today?
For someone who I would say is generally not going to actively manage or is not that astute with moving money around two different plans, it is a really simple solution. The con to that, though, is that you would be shocked the amount of people that we meet with or that have come to us and have said, I used to work with this old employer, I'm not sure who the 401k was with, though. Then you have to go and you have to find that money. And typically that can be a long process. We're working with a client right now that I'm thinking of particularly. We have to now provide a marriage certificate, a date of birth. We have to provide his birth certificate just to find out the amount inside that plan. So something that normally takes about 2 weeks to complete will now take upwards of 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, the other thing to consider too is companies are buying out other companies left and right these days.
They are.
So if you say fast forward 20 years down the road, there's no telling who's going to own that company, and then tracking it down, I imagine would make it that much harder to find.
It can, and it's, like we were talking about off camera, that's true in the insurance space as well. Keeping records is vital. Most of the time your account number won't change. If for some reason it does, though, you should receive some sort of correspondence from the new plan sponsor. Keep any sort of paperwork that comes to you, keep any email, that way you can always reference back to it if need be.
And my understanding, and as long as nothing has changed, there's no limit to the amount of old 401ks you can have out there. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. Now, there are some new laws that are starting to come about regarding how many rollovers you can do in a given 12-month period. And generally right now that is limited to 1 rollover per person per year. So if you have 3 or 4 old 401ks, you can only roll 1 of those per year.
Okay. Yeah, so it seems like it's better to manage that on the front end or as sooner rather than later. Because again, company gets bought out or for any other reason, if you were to pass away, then your beneficiaries have to go back and try to track all this down. It can be just a very cumbersome process.
It's very cumbersome, and I want to hit on what you just said for a minute about the beneficiaries. I always encourage clients that if you don't do this, please go out and do this. Write down all your account numbers, write down who those accounts are with, write down a contact name and a phone number. That way, if anything does happen to you, you have an end-of-life kit that either your spouse or a good friend or your attorney who wrote your will can reference to. That way, when they are going through probating the estate, and the executor almost has a playbook that they can just start calling those people.
That's a very good point, especially when people are mourning and going through that process. It's not the easiest thing to do to track down all this money that's been left around in all these different places.
Right, it makes it that much easier on the ones you leave behind.
Let's talk for a minute about vesting schedules. I had mentioned in the top of the show that Americans are generally changing employers every 4.5 years or so. A lot of vesting schedules are longer with that. But first, tell us about what is a vesting schedule and how does that come into play when you're thinking about leaving your employer?
Great question. So a vesting schedule says this. They say, if a vesting schedule is going to be 5 years long, for instance, every year you'll be vested an additional, usually 20% of the employer's contributions. Normally, you're always vested in your contributions. I'd say 99.99% of the time you are. In fact, I can't even think of a time that you're not. But the employer uses vesting schedules as a way to retain and keep employees. That way they don't keep having a high turnover. If they can tie some sort of compensation to you staying there for a longer period of time, or at least giving the employer some sort of predictability on at least how long you'll stay there, it makes their job much easier.
Yeah, let's talk about also, you decide to leave your employer, you have a new job, and then you decide, you know what, it does make sense for me to either transfer into another 401k, my new employer's 401k or retirement plan, or roll it over into an IRA. What happens to your holdings in your old 401k? Do those transfer, those same funds or investments transfer over in kind, or are they liquidated, or what exactly happens with that?
Normally those holdings are liquidated. Now, given that it's going to another retirement plan, typically what that plan will do is they will liquidate your holdings, it'll move it to cash within the account, then they'll actually send a check either to your IRA custodian or to your new 401k custodian. That way, once that check is received, you can then invest across the new investment options of your choice.
And a lot of times your old employer will give you an option of receiving the check yourself or transferring it electronically or sending a check directly to your new employer to that new IRA, right?
Yes, sir.
So I always recommend don't get that check in your hand because
never get that check.
Too much can go wrong when that happens.
Procrastination is a really easy thing to do. If you ask my wife, I think if you ask yours, I think Moya and Shelly would both say we're pretty good at that sometimes. As soon as you receive that check or that check is written out, you have 60 days to put it into your new fund, which is about 2 months. 2 months goes by pretty quickly, so we always recommend that you have that check either sent to your advisor's office or to the new custodian's office. That way it just makes it that much easier for you.
Yeah, I can't agree more with that. Just take that procrastination out of the equation.
Absolutely.
When we come back off break, I want to talk about what to do when you start with your new company. So we're going to take another short break, more about retirement plans when we return.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
They're coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
We're back with Jonathan and McAlister and discussing what to do with your retirement plan when you change employers. Jonathan, we talked before about what to do with your previous employer. Let's talk now when you get to your new employer. What do you need to do with the new employer's retirement plan? What are some of the things that we need to think about?
So typically what you'll do within the first week or two is you'll actually want to go and sit down with their HR contact person. Most large companies will have one, although a lot of times if you're working at a smaller firm or a smaller company, that might be the CEO or the owner. A couple of questions you want to ask them is this, if you don't know these already. What fund options are available inside the 401k or the 403b in which I'll be participating? Is this a Roth-K platform, or is a Roth-K platform offered, or is this more of a traditional 401k platform? What do the employer's contributions look like into there? What percentage do they match on top? And then how is that percentage structured? There's a couple of very large institutions around Memphis that have some fairly complex contribution strategies that you have to know how to read the documents to determine, okay, if I put in X amount, they will put in X amount, and that's the max. We always want to make sure that our clients are putting in enough to at least get their employer's contribution, because why give up free money?
That's right. Then the other thing too is there's always, not always, sometimes there'll be a new vesting schedule for those matching contributions, right? So something we should be aware of, that hopefully you're not starting a new job and then turning around and leaving it that quickly, but you just never know what's going to happen these days.
You know, if you're turning jobs every 2 to 3 years and you do have a vesting schedule, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table. Your old employer's vesting schedule is not going to transfer over to your new employer's vesting schedule. Let's say you have an 8-year vesting schedule and you're working for a company in Mississippi and you transfer to a job in Tennessee. They might have a 5-year vesting schedule, and that starts usually from day one. So if you move over and you lose half of your employer's contributions there, you work for company B for 4 years, you could leave an additional 20% on the table if you decide to leave that job then.
So you give up some of your matching, but you still get the benefit of deferred income and getting money into the right place for your retirement. So I would still recommend doing it, but just, again, I guess being aware of what you're giving up when you do decide to make a change, right?
Absolutely, and I want people, and I encourage people to do this. Go sit down with an advisor if you never have. A lot of people typically only come in with a 401k, and you always want to be very tax conscious about your current tax bracket and your future tax brackets. Sometimes, and this is completely depending on someone's situation, sometimes it makes more sense to pay taxes now and have tax-free money later, rather than defer those taxes if you expect to be in a higher tax bracket as you approach retirement or in the later years of retirement.
So let me dig a little bit deeper into this, because you mentioned encouraging people to sit down with a person. Of course, nowadays you can go online and find just a myriad or just a tremendous amount of information on any topic that you want. Certainly around investing, everybody has an opinion, it seems like. So what are some of the difference with these online investing tools or these robo-advisors versus going and sitting down with an actual person?
I think a lot of it comes down to how comfortable you are taking control of your finances. I was talking with a client the other day in Michigan, and she said this. She said, "Jonathan, I hate Google." I said, "Why do you hate Google?" She said, "I don't go on Google and tell you how to do your job, and you don't go on Google to tell me how to do my job. I trust you enough to know how to do your job and execute it well." I think a lot of times with robo-advisors, people lean on those robo-advisors. I can think of 2 or 3 big ones right now to really just help them do asset allocation and diversification within their accounts. And the term that we use a lot is what's called advisor alpha. It's sitting down with someone to actually help pull out other needs, other concerns, things that a robo-advisor is not going to be asking you. So it's a much more personalized approach. I like to compare it to a shotgun versus a rifle. If you're using a rifle, you're going to be hitting that one point. If you're a decent shot, I miss a lot. If you use a shotgun, you're going to be trying to hit just a wide area. For us, we want to be that rifle. We want to hit that one point every time and be as accurate as possible.
So it sounds like from what you're saying, an alpha, advisor alpha, using a person, if you've got someone experienced and knows what they're doing, they're going to be asking you a lot more questions to draw out what your needs are, and it may be in different areas. So what's your retirement plans look like? What do you plan on doing in retirement? Because that can drastically affect how much money you need to have saved.
Oh, it absolutely can. You hear all these rules of thumb that say you need to be saving X amount of your income every year, or you need to have X times your final salary to live like you've been living the rest of your life. Well, what if you want to take a big trip? What if you want to travel the world the first year of your retirement? That drastically changes things. I can't think of a single client right now that says, I just want to stay the same in retirement. Most people want to say, I've worked for the past 40, 50 years. I want to have fun. I want to start spending the money that I've been working for my entire life.
Yeah, great point about traveling. That's one of the things that most people like to do, especially soon after they retire, is get out, get away from home and experience more of life that they had to give up while they were working hard so many years. So going back to starting your new job, a lot of times you'll have companies, some of the larger companies even still have these pension plans, certainly governments, but talk about the difference between having a pension plan and having a 401k or 403b type plan.
So a pension plan, all it says is on the back end, they're going to guarantee you a payout for X amount of years. Now, how you take that payout is completely up to you. A 401k or a 403b allows you to put in your amount. Now, typically private employers have started to move away from pension plans due to a couple things. One, they tend to be expensive to maintain. And I think the bigger reason right now is we hear that people are living longer and longer every day. They have to be able to adjust and to maintain enough in the pension plan to account for someone living to 100 years old, to living to 110 years old. And they've already said that the first person to live to 150 has already been born. I can't think of a way if I'm managing a pension fund to account for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not easy and they're expensive to maintain. Let's talk about the matching that's offered with employers again. A lot of times there's a wait period before an employer will start contributing or matching what your contributions are.
Right.
And I always recommend that customers, or anyone for that matter, they should start saving that money that they were going to save in the retirement plan into, say, a savings account or something, just to get used to it, and also just to save up a little bit more money. And then when they can start saving to that retirement plan, if their cash flow allows to do that. What's your take on that?
You know, I think it really depends on the client's personal situation. We were talking about those 3 to 6 months of living expenses earlier on, that Americans are not saving as much as they are right now. That 1 year typically waiting period before either you can start contributing or your employer starts contributing is a great time to play catch up on some cash reserves. That being said, if we do have a client that comes in as cash heavy and they've moved from one job to another, and hypothetically, let's say they were putting in 10%, we still want them to put in that 10% to their current plan or adjust it to what their financial plan dictates or financial strategy.
We could talk about this all day. Unfortunately, we only have a limited amount of time, but thank you again for coming on. Appreciate you coming out.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Think of your retirement plan like you think of your car. Your retirement plan can take you to a place where you don't have to work, which is where we all want to go. But just like a car needs gas, oil changes, and maintenance, your retirement plan needs some TLC also. You need to review it at least annually. Keep track of those retirement plans from your previous employers or consolidate them. Take care of your retirement plan so they can take care of you. That's all the time we have today. Thanks to Jonathan McAlister, and thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more shows, follow us on YouTube or Facebook at Germantown Municipal Television. You can also visit our website at www.gmtvonline.org. And remember, each person's financial situation is unique. Before making any decisions, speak to a financial professional to see if our discussions today are in your best interest. We'll see you next month. I'm Daniel Dent, and now you are in the money.